Hello and welcome to the Faith Report, bringing you your daily video on those Christian news bites you won't find in mainstream media. In a previous video, we discussed a church in Colorado that was suing their city for not allowing them to shelter the homeless due to zoning laws. Now, a similar situation out of Ohio has grabbed headlines where a pastor was actually criminally charged for housing homeless people in his church. The story centres around Pastor Chris Avell, who leads a non-denominational church called Dad's Place in the town of Bryn, Ohio. Back in March last year, Pastor Avell decided to keep his church open 24 hours a day and 7 days a week in order to provide shelter for the growing homeless population in Bryn. According to reports, the local homeless shelter was often at capacity, forcing dozens of people to sleep outside even in the bitter cold Ohio winters. Moved by compassion, Pastor Avell opened his church doors to give the homeless people a warm, safe place to stay. Now, by some accounts, Dad's Place has helped over 100 homeless people get off the streets since they began their open door policy. However, in November, the city government began receiving complaints about people staying overnight at the church. Now, because the church is zoned commercially, city officials claim allowing people to eat, sleep and do laundry there violates local zoning laws. After failed attempts to bring the church to compliance, the city filed 18 criminal charges against Pastor Avell for the zoning violations. When interviewed about the situation, Pastor Avell made it clear that he is not trying to operate a fully fledged homeless shelter, but simply wants to show Christian love and care for those in need, and he believes churches are called to do just that. The pastor pled not guilty to the charges at the arraignment last week, and the case is expected to continue through the court system in the coming weeks. Now, this story is a prime example that highlights the tensions that can sometimes exist between the church, who wants to carry out their mission to love and serve the vulnerable, and the city government tasked with enforcing zoning and public safety regulations. It's a complex issue with good arguments on both sides. On the one hand, churches should not be above the law, and some regulation of their charitable activities may be warranted to maintain order and safety. Unmanaged homeless shelters can generate neighbourhood complaints and create hazardous conditions inside if fire and sanitation codes aren't followed. The city has an obligation to enforce democratically enacted ordinances evenly across all organisations. However, one can also understand the position of Pastor Avell and the religious convictions behind his actions. As Christians, we are repeatedly called in the Bible to care for the poor, homeless and downtrodden. Jesus himself ministered to the outcasts in society and instructed his followers to house strangers and feed the hungry in his name. The impulse to care for the vulnerable comes from the very heart of our faith. So how can these competing interests be reconciled? Perhaps there's room here for compromise and cooperation for the good of all. Couldn't the city offer flexibility and support to the church to allow them to keep caring for the homeless, while also ensuring proper safety standards are being met? Might there be zoning exception possible to accommodate the church's mission? And on the church's part, perhaps volunteering to work closely with officials to address reasonable concerns could help ease tensions. In a perfect world, governments and churches would collaborate to help the disadvantaged, combining their respective abilities and resources. Each of them definitely has something important to contribute. If you want to see the video where I discuss the situation over in Colorado, click the video on screen now. Until next time, stay well and keep the faith.